Hey y'all, it's your co-host Yogi Rich. Welcome to OneAnswer Yoga, episode 2. This episode's a little bit more about me. Actually, as you'll probably notice if you watched the previous episode, it was meant to be episode 1. But in this little tale here, I try to tell my story about what got me here to this point, what motivated me to be here. And if I wasn't clear in this episode, let me be clear now. I'm driven by the objective to live in a more peaceful planet in which we are less destructive to each other and to the earth itself. I want to do that by being practical and being realistic. So, throughout this journey with me, you'll hear a little bit more about my story and what we're hoping to build here with my brand Lifeward. This episode ends a little bit abruptly, and it literally immediately follows the first one, like I said previously. So please bear with us as we figure this out all together. One love. Peace.
Hi.
Well, hello, here we are.
Here we are.
I'm gonna pick up something that we were talking about like before recording here, getting warmed up, I guess, is the idea behind like not just having one podcast, but having like an ecosystem of podcasts. They have like some sort of they have some like correlating factor, but it's really just meant to like hit everybody and anybody who's interested. And I was thinking like, one of my friends asked me like, who do you think like your target audience would be even for this channel, even if it is like a larger channel? And I said, everybody. She said that was cheating. And I was like,
There's
well, if
definitely
you can breathe.
nobody's ever gonna like that answer.
Yeah, I'm like, well, if you can breathe, I'm gonna show breathe. Like it's really. But I feel like for me personally, Americans. Like if I feel like I'm more of a subject matter expert on Americans, American culture, and just speaking from where I'm from, like, and also understanding like just the responsibility that Americans have, to like really step up to like this like throne that we've been put on, whether it's like, but it is the fact that like, these places like DC and California and New York, like they have global influence, and the people that live here for centuries have had influence on the rest of the world. And one way to look at that is like be very, very nonchalant about it, or be like, oh, that's just kind of coincidental. But I think as a Virginian who's like close to Thomas Jefferson and all them, like they're kind of like, hey, like, hey, like we risked our lives, like, you know what I mean? Like, I know there's a lot of beef going on, but like, let's not go too crazy here. Let's let's still love this experiment. And yeah, I just noticed that like, it's English that most people are speaking. Most people are fluent in American English, and there's just like our people that I feel like have been sort of like put on the down burners, or it's like people don't even really view Americans. They view Republicans and Democrats and independents. Like we're divided by our voting bloc rather than like just like this commonality that we all share.
Yeah,
And
okay.
and until I learn Spanish and Arabic, maybe I can tailor to different crowds. But like right now, that's kind of like where I'm at. Who do you think the audience should be?
I kind of agree with you because, of course, my whole belief is that yoga is the answer to everything. And so for years now, I've been going around just telling people, whatever the question, yoga is the answer. So for me, it's like people who are curious, people who are suffering a lot. Like that's a big one for me, because I think a lot of people right now are confused. They don't know what's going on. They're a little bit lost in their life. It can feel very unsettling right now. And I think having this ability to be like, you know what, there are tools that you can have in your toolbox and things that you can use to help yourself maintain your peace and happiness and joy in these really challenging, difficult times. And in that sense, I think then, yes, Americans, because Americans obviously are going through a very challenging time. And while they're really open to yoga, I think so many of them are familiar more with the postures than they are with the actual, deeper philosophy and teachings. So for me, it's really important that, we change the definition of what yoga means in the US and really in the Western world, but also in the US. So I guess that's a sub thing for me, is like having people understand that yoga is so much more than what they realize and what they think it is. So I think maybe a good place for us to start is to talk about who we are and what brought us here together. Because obviously, here's two people, not even in the same state,
Yeah.
but friends who came together and were like, you know what, this podcast, but just for the record, this podcast has been calling to us for probably, has it been a year yet? I don't know. It's been a long time where it's been like calling. And for whatever reason, we were, not able to follow the call, but right now we are. So yeah. So maybe you could start, Quentin, and just talk about like who you are, how you came to the moment you are in today, and then we can also talk a little bit about how we met, and then I'll also explain a little bit my background.
Man, where to start?
You can start it with birth if you want, like really just tell us the story of Quentin.
Yeah, I'm like, I'll start from the beginning. So I was born in Northern Virginia, in like Fairfax, Virginia. Prior to that, my mother, who had a daughter already, like my older sister, just moved from New York to Alexandria, New York. Like, I think they lived in Brooklyn at the time. So she was sort of trying to get out of that environment. So she came to Northern Virginia. She thought it was the South, all that stuff. And then she was working in the post office in DC. And my dad, who had already been living in DC and in Maryland throughout most of his adult life, also worked at the post office in DC, the main like facility. So the way that they tell it, and I want to do like a little caveat. So I think I'm going to start with this part because I feel like I've always felt like I was sent here. Like it didn't feel like they like decided to have me and da 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 da. And it wasn't like that. It was kind of like, very gung ho. But I'm starting with this because, I don't know exactly how, but they're crashing waves of them like meeting each other to bless me with this life, like definitely feels an important part of the story. So it was actually interesting. They didn't like, my dad was really annoyed with my mom. He didn't want to like work next to her, but she thought he was like cute and mature and all that kind of stuff. And she was looking for a stable man. He was 50 and my mom was, or he would have been like late 40s. My mom was probably early 30s at that time. And he's real cool. He's like a real cool, like low key kind of guy. My mom is very like high energy, like let's get it, let's dance, let's do it. So they met and my mom got pregnant before, like my mom was pregnant while they got married. So I don't know all the details, some of that might be grown folk business. But at the end of the day, they got married in Las Vegas. And we next thing you know, we were in Virginia. They were looking for a place to live. They landed on Stafford, Virginia, and bought a house there. I was born in Fairfax, and then in June of 95, we moved to Stafford. And
yeah, for those of you who are not familiar with what he's talking about, like Northern Virginia is a thing. Like Northern Virginia is a whole entity in and of itself and has its own culture too, right? Like it has a very separate culture from even the rest of Virginia. So I just want to presence that as people are listening to your story and trying to understand where you come from.
Northern Virginia has a certain texture to it that if you're from Northern Virginia, you get it. And Northern Virginia is in the hot spot. I mean, that's where everybody lives that works in DC, or they live in Maryland, but really in Virginia if you want to have nice land. And also Virginia has a strong sense of history too. So I feel like I just want to give a strong credit to the state. But Stafford, Virginia at the time was not considered Northern Virginia. But as like throughout my life and through 0 to 18, it sort of turned into Northern Virginia at the end of it as sprawl started to come down. One of my main memories as a kid that I feel like is still animating me to this day is there was like this when I was 6, um there was this big, what's it called? Shopping center like built, like Lowe's, Target, Five got like a Shoppers, all this kind of stuff. And I remember it was a huge like huge green forest before. And I remember they cut it all down, they built this thing, and I still remember like that feeling of being sick to my stomach, seeing like all those trees cleared. And
Wow.
it's funny, even my best friends in high school who also lived in Stafford all his whole life, he remembered that. That's something that we bonded over. And
How old were you when that happened?
I was 6. Many things when I was 6 happened that 2001 was when I was 6. So the towers came down. For me, it was interesting. Aaliyah, the singer, she died in August. She died in late August.
She died
And
just a
then
few weeks before the towers fell, right? I
I was
know.
like, oh, I'm not getting on a plane. So one of my main fears for a long time in my life were heights and planes and roller coasters and things like that. That like, because I was like, if they can die, and like I have no chance. Like I just got here. Like, and my
Wow.
dad also had anthrax when they were working in the post office, and he was so senior then, so he would have been 56. So like he was kind of in charge of telling the people about anthrax, the anthrax threat in the letters and all that kind of stuff. And he was one of the main sorters, not main, but like shift lead kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
I was just
anyways, he
telling
got
someone the other day, Quentin, I totally
yeah.
forgot about anthrax. And like it just completely like because when I think about that time, there's so much that's along with it that I kind of forgot that anthrax. I mean, if that had happened on its own, that would have
Mm-hmm.
been like the most big, huge thing that ever happened in our history.
Yep.
And here's your dad like working in the post office, right? Like that should have
Yep.
been like a thing, but instead it got sort of encompassed
It
by
got
this bigger thing.
it got encompassed, and as I look back on it, there was, like a lot of things that we see in the news today is that there is always a higher hand that wants to like kind of write the narrative, right? There's like a storyline, there's a societal storyline that had to be kept. But for me, for a long time, okay, so another important thing about when I was 6 too, um, that was when my grandmom and she had adopted two, like she had adopted like two kids. So they were my uncles, but they were like 12 and 18. So they were like, so first like brothers, if you could say, right, that lived there for a while. And my relationship with them is like, good and bad. There are definitely different things being 6, right? And having living with a 12-year-old and a 17-year-old. But that experience having Nana in the house and having New Yorkers in the house like really
Mm.
changed things. And the last thing I'll note when I was 6, and this is kind of like more on the interesting side, was when I was 6, I very remember up until being 6, so like 3 to 6, like I remember always having dreams about basically having positive dreams. Like I would have reoccurring dreams based off of shows. I was telling like shows that I would watch, like Rugrats or Godzilla came out in the late 90s. These different Godzilla wasn't scary to me. I don't know why. Twister, I think, came out in the late 90s. So these like movies, they would like play in my dreams, right? And I would be moving from place to place and just enjoying myself. And I remember
Hearing how these things affect a 6-year-old. Just to give everybody context, which we're going to find out soon enough. But like when he was 6, I was 29. So it's so sweet
yeah,
to hear about like the things that I was just like, whatever. Twister came out. And your little
yeah.
6-year-old self was like, oh my gosh, there's tornadoes.
This is so intense. Oh my goodness, Godzilla. Like I watched Godzilla 30 times at least. And but it was interesting for me because this kind of set me on my path, I feel like. Um was I also had this dream where all my good dreams went away. It was like a parade. So like all the characters like Godzilla, like literally like a parade through a city in my like dream world city, and it was a parade and all these characters just left. And for like maybe the next 10 years I either didn't dream or I would have nightmares. And in order to like, and this is why like this is, I guess I could say, like was part of the start of my like mental training, because I would be in dreams and I would recognize patterns like, okay, I'm getting chased by a monster truck again, like how can I wake myself from this dream, or how can I moderate this dream, and how can I do things
And you
that
were you
like
were doing this at 6?
7. Like the 6
7.
6 to 8 was rough. 6 to 7 was rough, but I was also you're 6, you're peeing the bed too. So there's like all these different things that are going on. And I remembered being like, okay, I can control my dreams. Like I can go from this place to this place. I could wake myself out of a dream while being in a dream, because the last 7 times that happened, I either peed or I got attacked by the monster. And it's like, why would I want to deal with that? I'll give myself another opportunity to fall back asleep and feel something different. And but anyways, so that's like little childhood. We lived like a modest life. We lived in a decent sized home in a nice place like suburban Stafford, but both of my parents were office. And when my dad got anthrax when I was 6, and soon after, he wasn't working obviously, and then when he was sick, and then as he healed, it was like 2 years later he could retire at like 58 or 59. So at that point, primarily, he started working like he started working for the bus system, and started working like part-time, and my mom stayed working full-time until eventually I turned 16 and she was 50 and she could take early retirement. But a couple things that I was interested in as a kid that I feel like have a strong impact on me today, like martial arts. So when I was like,
Mhm.
I started doing karate when I was 6, and the older dudes started to move in. I realized how important it was to be strong, to be disciplined, to not really know how to fight, but more so know how to defend yourself. And but also fighting's fun. Like sparring is just so fun. So I got into
Especially when
martial
you have
arts.
siblings.
Yeah, yeah, and I was like, now I got people to fight, and all my friends, I was like, you want to come over here and wrestle? Like, you know what I mean? Like, get over here. Like, you know what I mean?
I got some
If you don't
uncles
want to,
that'll wrestle with you.
you want to wrestle or you want to play football, which is like wrestling and running. Like, what do you, which choice? So when I was young, I was into that. The martial arts happened, and that was awesome. I ended up getting my black belt in that, and that taught me so many things we'll talk about later. Um, in high school, well, I guess just say ever since I was a little kid, I love putting things together and building things. So when they keep asking you over and over again, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I decided to be an architect when I was in high school. So I took like drafting classes, and I was pretty good at math and like different like classes around architecture. But when I went to apply to Virginia Tech, actually when I toured Virginia Tech, I was like, I went to the architecture thing, and they're like, the average student here has a 4.4, and I was like, well, I do not have that. I was like, so I didn't end up getting in, and I was like, I really want to go to Tech, but I didn't get into the architecture program, and their architecture program is like literally number 1 and 2 in like, I know in the state, but maybe in the country, so they don't
Wow.
let people in. It's like if you don't get in, that's it. Like you
That's
just
it.
weren't and so I was kind of heartbroken. So, but at that time, but it really ended up excellent because I was working. I had a lawn care company, and I was able to go to community college for 2 years and keep working both jobs and go to community college, and then still go to Virginia Tech. It ended up being much better because what I ultimately ended up doing was doing civil engineering. Then I had a focus in construction and in land development, and that led me to like fall into the construction industry. And at first I was a home builder, and then I transitioned into commercial construction, and spent 7 years there for the largest private GC in the country, and also in DC specifically, just building buildings. And the word that we use, and I'll probably use a lot, it might slip, is running work, or just like organizing something getting built. And I learned so many things like throughout those 7 years that it's like, it's just incredible. And in July of 2023, well, I should say early. Okay, so during COVID is when I got introduced to yoga in the first place.
That was
Not really, but not really. I actually before my wife, I had a partner who was going through a lot of things in her life, and she was trying to introduce me to yoga, but I was so Christian at the time, and that
hmm.
I thought, anything that's not in the Bible, chakras or anything that's not in the Bible, like explicitly, like in that is even quasi spiritual, I felt was, blasphemous or whatever word you want to use. And it was just a really a blessing in disguise the whole time. Like I've always had spiritual women in my life. It's just a really deep blessing that I've had. But
Were your parents
um
really, I'm sorry to interrupt, were your parents
yeah,
really religious?
yes and no. I would say like what we consider religion, like they were spiritual. They had a connection with God in the way that I've come to see more and more of. They grew up. My dad grew up Catholic, and he didn't. And his first daughter went to Catholic school, and then her kids, my nieces and nephews, also went to Catholic school. And then Nana, my mom's mom, was like, I don't know what she did in the church, but she was Baptist, all caps Baptist. You're going to hell, boy, if you do this. You're going to hell, boy, if you do that. You're going to, like that kind of thing. And then, so
She
when I
spend
was
more time
young,
in church than out, like every day she was up in church doing something.
she dressed like she was going to church every day. Like, you know what I mean? Like she had the hat. She was born in 1939 from Raleigh, North Carolina. And then she moved to Queens and had
Wow.
9, basically. Had like 6 kids biologically and adopted 3, I believe. So she was just, and like, that was in the days where, the state, in order to get benefits, welfare benefits, you couldn't have a boyfriend. You couldn't have the dude around. Not that, I'm not to say that granddad and her always got along at the best, but just like, so a lot of people ended up having to raise their children quasi alone, or at least without a man in the house, or a boyfriend at least in the house consistently, because if you did, then you will lose certain things. But eventually she got out of that. And so my mom is, I would say, spiritual, but I feel like she really likes satsang or gospel. Like she goes to church for praise and worship. You know what I mean? Like she just feels that energy. And so I grew up with my parent when I was younger, especially in the Baptist church, because they both went like younger as in 0 to like 12, and I was baptized at 4. And I just remember that they would always stand up and clap and sing and dance. So like to me, church is always about rejoicing. Like spiritual life has a rejoiceness to it. Unlike the Catholic kind of style of doing things where I would go to like, visit them. I also what I do want to say is that even though my parents were religious, but it's also like I have a cousin, my mom's sister, who married a rabbi. So my
Wow.
cousin, he's Jewish. My aunt's Jewish. He's Jewish. So I grew up with that. And then, um, I have the person I'm named after, Quentin. Actually, I was named after my oldest cousin, the first little kid, basically, of the sisters, my aunts, and his name was Quentin. He converted to Islam, and he goes by Kawi now. So in my
Wow.
that it's always been like a diverse, and even within the Christianity, like first we started off as Baptists, and then I think Mount Zion Baptist Church I think it was off a Triangle, somewhere like that. I think it moved. It was there's Pastor Jones, to give him a shout out. I thought he was God at first. Like I literally was like, is that God? Like when I was like 3, I was like, but um, anyways, so then we went to this place called Strong Tower Ministries. And
Oh.
it was a national Christian church. And this was the first time I ever had a white pastor. Right, I went to black churches. The first time I ever had a white pastor, and he was the only white person there. Everyone else was black, and his whole message was about the state, like how not the state, how the church, the system of Jews. Like when I was a kid, I went to he was like he went to a segregated church where black people weren't allowed to go to. He's like, how was that Christian? And that would be his whole thing. He's like this. Just because you identify as something doesn't mean you have to go along with that whole system, the way that things are
Yeah,
run.
no kidding.
So
That's a
that was a
powerful
big part.
message, though, for you to hear so young, right? How old were you when he was
I
pastor?
was 12 when I really started going. Like, was when I could start driving. I would even go without my mom sometimes. So I think to answer your question, it got to the point where I felt like I was more spiritual than both my parents. My dad stopped. My dad never went to the non-denominational church, so he kind of stopped going to church with us roughly at 12 to 13. But he would always drive us there. I think for him, God was in nature and in life. So he would just spend time outdoors a lot and going on walks and talking to people. And he always had a spiritual point of view. But then my mom would be the one that might concentrate God more into the church, like during church experiences. But she would pull over on the side of the road with crying tears of bliss and just like praising,
Gosh, you're
and
kidding.
about Jesus. Like, you hear these songs and it's just
Wow.
so I kind of grew up with both things where my dad was the cool, non-emotional, but he would just live that life. And then my mom was she could just, just hallelujah, and so those are my parents. And okay, so anyway, so during COVID, things shifted. The construction job that I was on, I was things shifted a little, I heard. And to make it even
Estimating how much,
sharper,
how it affected everybody. Things shifted. I think we could just probably end the podcast there. Things shifted.
things shifted. But I would say this: before the shift, my dad passed from battling cancer in October of 2019, and then the woman that I was with for like 7 years on and off, 7-8 years on and off, and we lived together. We had a breakup like 2 days before Kobe died, right in the beginning of 2020,
Oof.
and then I turned 25 in April of 2020, so it was like the first month in, and I was like, something, things just started feeling funny. And I would say really I was like, I would say it goes in this order. I would say I did mushrooms for the first time in
Mm-hmm.
2020. And then I smoked tree for the first time after I turned 25. And then I did yoga for the first time in June or July of 2020. And I would say those three things in succession, and then like the yoga practices, really what made yoga stick was I did 20 minutes of deep breathing. And that was really like, wow, like this is a high, like that normal life, drinking, smoking tobacco, like even doing coke every now and then, doing these different things, or like sexual pleasure or whatever, like they don't really relate to that. They don't hit that mark. But like being able to do deep breathing, like these different things, like they're just higher highs, if you will. And and so I got into yoga for a while. I started doing it very consistently. I would say like about a year into it, I really started to go like multiple times a day. And that was still like 6 feet. No one can talk to each other. And I knew in my heart I wanted to be an instructor. And what ended up happening was like, first of all, no, the studio that I really wanted to get it from in Northern Virginia or in Woodbridge, Virginia, they weren't offering it. And then for a long time, and then when they did, they're like, okay, I know you waited a year or roughly. We're going to do it in a year from now, maybe, possibly, and it's going to cost like $1 gazillion. And I was like, I got to do something. I got to do something. So at that time in my life, we just did research, and then I found Yoga Renew online, which is like an online training course. And I remember I got Virginia Tech civil engineer. Like I feel like, and all my classes, the worst classes I ever took were online classes. I'm a very in-person type of person. And so, but what I felt in my heart really was, I was like, most of this is like, if you're going to class every single, like we were every single day, multiple times a day, and getting in reading and just like really studying, I know that like the earnestness, which I came to find out was like what's really, really important, and consistently practicing. So I got my certification completion in July of 2013. 2023, sorry. And ever since then, I have been teaching and sharing and
That's your
just like,
beautiful Safa.
yes, that's my beautiful Sava. She's like sneaking in like,
No worries, you guys
um,
you'll get to be introduced to the extended extended family of the podcast.
I can't wait.
She has perfect timing, because I was just about ready to ask, like, wait, have you met Safa yet? Has she come into the picture yet in our timeline of the story?
So Safa saved me, because those things that I was mentioning I tried in 2020 was with her.
Mm.
And also just we had met in middle school, but she lived in Woodbridge where I had lived. So after like the breakup and there was just much more space to have a new romantic partner. And I was like, okay, let's see how this goes. And pretty much like as soon as we got connected with each other again, Kimmy.
I was going to say, and if you hear all those noises in the background, like all that scrambling, those are our doggy friends.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, he just decides, "Let me grab this bone and just on that thing." Um, but I just felt like,
There might be many
especially
doggy friends that interrupt the podcast, so that's something people
yes,
should be well aware of too. We're
no,
very dog
yeah,
associated in this.
yeah, you have to like them. I'm sorry, guys. Um, but just that, yeah, we had met and like so a lot of our early dates were us going to yoga together and us like just spending time like on self improvement and also getting to know each other through like just different activities. Like now that COVID's hit and I'm not on the job side as much. Like now let's just go on a random trip to go here. Let's go on a random hike to do this. Let's do this. Let's do that. And she's just so energetic and like um energetic, confident, but really the main thing is like, I want to do this, it's going to get done. You know what I mean? And just having a partner like that really changed everything. And then we got married 2 years after. And so we've been married for about 2 years now, going on three in November. So but anyway, so that's me. I've been teaching. I taught for a while in Northern Virginia, and then I left the corporate world and I moved from DC to Denver in January of this year. So that's me.
Now you're in Denver. And what
Mm.
are you doing in Denver now? Give us a little update on that too.
I'm doing
I
this
know
full
we
time.
talk about it a lot, but what are you doing in Denver?
This I'm practicing. I'm teaching. I teach primarily outdoor park classes. There's a park called Cheeseman Park, but I also do like hike classes. I'm just really like a self-employed yoga instructor, if you will. And now I'm doing podcasts, doing this podcast with you, but hopefully doing more of a virtual press. But this is very much the infancy phase, and a huge leap of faith. But it's super exciting because I've done it before with trying new things and starting new ventures. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now. And then I might like pick up something part time here or there, but primarily that's what I'm into. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely both Quentin and I are in these really cool transition phases, which was also kind of what um, what sort of brought us together at this time and allowed for us to do this sharing and this experience of this podcast right now, which is pretty fun. I mean, it's very interesting that our lives you know, when we talk about my history, then we'll talk a little bit
Yeah.
about how we met and how we were brought
Yeah.
together. But it is just such a beautiful thing that two people living in totally different states, having totally different experiences, being basically a generation apart, right? Like
Yeah.
your parents are older than me, but my stepson is older
Yeah.
than you. So
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
generation apart, being a white woman and a black man, being
Yeah.
all the things that we see
Yeah.
on the surface, being really, really diverse and different. And
Mhm.
yet, from the moment we met, there was some sort of connection where we were like, we get to do something together. There's some sort of something there that we want to work on. So here
I
we
felt
are.
that. Here we are. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like thinking now, I'm like, I left out so many little details, but it's like, that's life. It's like, it's almost every time you think of a time period, I'm like, oh, that's kind of important too. That's kind of important too. But I feel like now really kind of have a better answer. It's like the skill set and just like the life that I've lived has like culminated still in me today. And like all of those things together, it's like building this channel or just helping building something that is larger than any of us that brings a diverse set of people together that are all skilled and people get to kind of see that and put that on display like um is really in alignment with all the things that I've been doing throughout my life. And knowing that like we're not really anything without the people around us, really. It's like, we're so, like, connected. It's like especially as, like, a construction superintendent or a or a yoga educator where it's like, I'm relying on as an instructor, I'm relying on people coming to the class. Like, if no one comes to the class, then then it's just like, I'm just a guy there, right? It's like and then, and then when it comes to just construction, it's like, if you think if a construction superintendent that is an expert in electrical work or an expert in concrete work or an expert in this or an expert in that and knows better than the foreman that has been, for lack of a better word, anointed to like run that scope of work, you're gonna make your you're going to make your project unsuccessful. You have to let people shine, and you have to be engaged and present and just understand the bigger picture and guide and adjust and accommodate. But don't just think like it has to be my way or the highway. I know how all of y'all need to do everything in order for it to be successful. And yeah, in this phase of my life, it just feels like this is kind of easier to build, but can also be more long lasting in the sense of we don't have to tear down any trees. We don't have to, tell anybody to work a 16-hour shift. We don't have to lift 50-pound bags here and there, but we can just have conversations, right? And through these conversations, hopefully, as we talk about ourselves, as people get to like see real people, not like these polished people that are on TV all the time, not answering questions or not being real. Um, and also even the spiritual side, where it's like a lot of times when you hear a swami or someone speak, it's in front of a podium and it's very like, it's very pure and
Or
very
it feels very
holy,
unrelatable because you're like, I'm not a swami.
unrelatable. Yeah, it's like, I'm not a swami. Like, I'm not going
Like
to do
that's
that.
great
You're
for
like,
him
I'm
or
gonna go
her,
fast
but
for the
like, how
rest of
does
my
that
life.
relate to me?
Yeah, like it doesn't resonate. So, but just this opportunity to kind of share what real life is like and how we're just trying to figure it out like everybody else, but still growing up where we grew up, these yoga teachings, like it's like really that like missing link. And I always say like, like I'm like, if Thomas Jefferson had the Bible and the Yoga Sutras, you know what I mean? Like that would have been like, oh my goodness, like we wouldn't even have been having this conversation. In school, we would have been taught breath work and how to really
Yeah.
properly take the body and all these kind of things. And it just so happens to be that that wasn't a part of the initial fabric. That's okay. But we're here now. And now we can build something, a mental structure within our people that is actually beneficial and productive for life, to an even higher degree than it has been for the last like 250 years or so, as we
Yeah, I
approach
think
that.
like integrating it into modern life is so fascinating because, yoga is over 5,000 years old. They don't know how old it is. They know it's just really old. And they keep trying to date it. And then, as they date things, they find out things are older than they thought. But what really attracts me to it is the fact that it does not matter how old it is still so relevant today. So all these things, and I'm always like, people come back to me and be like, oh yeah, they just, did a new study that found blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, but did you know the yogis knew that 5,000 years ago? Like,
Yeah, literally. Oh, neat. Brand new
I had
news.
a friend of mine was talking to me about neuroplasticity, right? And they were talking about, oh, so my sister's been practicing like plasticity and neuroplasticity. And so she repeats all these things to herself. Like she'll be walking on the beach and she'll be like, I am capable. I am
Wow.
beautiful. I am all these things. And I was like, oh yeah, that's like Pratipakshibhavana. That's what they teach in the Yoga Sutras. And I was like, it's great that people are finding these things and learning about them and discovering them. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, the yogis have known about this for a really long time. So maybe if we go to the source and kind of figure out what they had to say, then we'll find even more discoveries that can help us in the modern world.